Okay, it is recording. We are going to get started. For anybody that you all know that can't make it today or haven't made it, this will be made available. Also, for you all that are here, this will be made available if you do want to go back and review what we do talk about. Also, I will be providing you all with this slide deck. So we'll go ahead and get started, and if people come in, they can kind of catch up with where we're at. I am Rachel MacArthur. I am currently the contact person at CJC for the JMOUD grant program. I'm in charge of kind of standing it up, I guess. So most of the communication that you all have had has come from me. That will be consistent throughout until the commission does approve funds, and then it will probably go off to somebody else to run the grant and do the day-to-day and all of that. So currently, though, I am the one who, if you have questions beyond today, or if you're having issues with the application itself, I am the one to reach out to. So we'll go ahead and get started. Today, we're just going to do a quick overview of the grant itself. There have been some questions about eligibility, so I just want to make sure that that is clear. This is a formula grant, and so I'm going to show the funding table. You all should have received that in the email that I sent out with the solicitation. It is also available on our website for you all to look at. So if you have any questions about that, we can talk about that as well. We are going to just quickly, there's one slide on the application timeline, so you know what's happening and when to expect funds to go out. And then the majority of this is going to be going through SM Apply. I don't know if many of you are familiar with SM Apply, which is where the application lives. And so I just want to make sure we got some screenshots to go through just to kind of walk through that process. It can be a little counterintuitive sometimes. And so I want to make sure that experience that you all have with that is as painless as possible. And then, like I said, any sort of questions related to the grant at the end. Also, if you all have questions during this while I'm talking, please unmute, ask questions, raise your hand, all of that stuff. I tend to, just based on how my screen is, I tend to miss chat questions. And so it's probably just better to raise your hand or unmute, and feel free to interrupt me as we go through this. So real quickly, this is where we're at. It's the jail-based medication for opioid use disorder grant program. Here at CJC, we call it JMOUD. It was a result of House Bill 4002 that came out of the short session. The $10 million are available. This is a one-time grant program, pilot program. And so the funds, as of right now, as they sit, are only going to be available at one time, which we can get into as we go through this. The eligible recipients include cities and counties that operate a local correctional facility, or any tribal correctional facilities as well. And I do sometimes get questions about this. There is an opportunity to have joint applications and partnerships with other local facilities where you can do individual applications as well. So this is just kind of, I'm sure you all are familiar with this, but this is where this grant program came from, was this particular bill. As part of this bill, this is actually very important. This was a part of the solicitation. It's outlined under program goals and priorities. The bill was very specific about where funds are going to be awarded, right, in what areas. And so please be sure to review these priorities that are listed in the solicitation. So when staff does the analysis, and when our grant advisory committee does their analysis for recommendations for funding for the commission to then approve, this is what we're going to be looking at, okay, in terms of funding requests. So if you have, does anybody have any specific questions about this currently? If you haven't had a chance to look at this, please do so. You can reach out to me individually if you do have questions about budget requests. I will say that from CJC staff perspective, our job is to see whether or not something is allowable or unallowable, or whether or not it fits. We aren't able to say, yes, this is going to be funded. That's not what we're able to do. That's the commission's job. But it is something where if you do have a question, I can provide some guidance on how to articulate your budget request so that it may fit under one of these categories, if that makes sense. So any questions on this? This is an incredibly important piece of the solicitation. So when you are doing your budget requests, please have this list somewhere next to you when you're filling it out. Any questions? Orion.
Hi, Rachel. I'm just voicing for a couple of jails that I heard from at their training yesterday that there's a question that we're not, and I know I was on the committee that helped to develop this, and so we were trying to think about everything. But one thing that came up is some jails, especially smaller ones, were asking about electronic health record development if they don't have them, if that's often a first implementation step that's needed, and we weren't very specific to list that. So there's a question about whether that would be an allowable expense or not.
Yeah,
by a couple different jails.
That's a great question. So just to clarify, I'm trying to think of a way that I can answer this where it's helpful. If you have a budget request that isn't specifically spelled out in this list, and you can link it to something that is specifically spelled out in this list, I would encourage you to request that particular item, as long as, and you do have space in your budget request, your budget projection sheet. There is a narrative space. There isn't a word limit there. Be as specific as possible, as thorough as possible, and linking it to something on this particular list. The reason why I'm putting so much emphasis on this is in the bill. Okay, so there is not a lot of wiggle room from our standpoint in terms of what we are allowed or not allowed. And so where the analysis part will come in is where how that narrative and that request link back to something on this list. So that's about as outright in terms of our unallowable requests and what we go by. That is not an unallowable request. Whether or not it fits into something like this is something that the applicant has to link that request to something on this list.
Right.
So
okay. Absolutely. So I'm hearing
helpful.
that for those people that are applying, I am not, but they would need to justify that in the narrative and how it's meeting these other allowable expenses. If it's part of the cost is also this piece that might not be explicit on there.
Yes. So
okay.
Yeah, on its face, it's not an unallowable cost from like a CJC perspective, but we also, this is kind of where we've been directed to look at funding requests within the bill. So yes, so it is why we leave that space in the narrative on the budget projection sheet so that there can be the opportunity to make that link. So any other questions on this slide? Okay, we will move on then. This slide is really crowded. I recognize that. Like I mentioned earlier, this was formula funding. This is something that was recommended by the Rules Advisory Committee. And so CJC staff developed a formula based on some feedback from some subject matter experts that we talked to. And the commission last month approved this formula. And so one of the things, if you have any questions about how it was put together, I can reach out to you and speak with you individually on some of the elements. I also would encourage you, if you do have the time, our commission meetings are on our YouTube channel, that you can access them through our website. And so that's something that you can listen to that conversation as well. And so this is the funding table, again, this is available in the solicitation email that I sent out as well as on the website. Let me see here. Is it Jeremy? Sorry, is that whose hand is up?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. I was just wondering, with facilities that have contract beds, are those numbers attributed to the agency that houses those contracted people or the individual agency that sends the people out?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We actually got this question when we were doing this. So we use data that was provided to us from off the top of my head, I can't. It's the jail data. I know that's not helpful.
No, I
can't think
understand.
of it, I can't think of the acronym, but and so however it's tracked within individual jails is how that data is collected. And so the other thing that we don't know, or given kind of the extent of what that looks like and how it affects how jails operate, it wasn't something that was considered beyond what was in the data. But we do know that if this grant were to continue with funding, it is something that we could potentially consider as we kind of go forward with this formula. So kind of a non-answer, but just due to the nature of how this program is more or less, as it stands right now, a pilot program. It wasn't something that was initially included in the formula beyond the data that we were given, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yep. And I think there's something in the chat.
Sorry for the interruption, Rachel. I think I was just trying to think of what data
system
you were talking about.
I could pull it up. I just am not sure. It was, yeah, it's just Oregon jail data. So, and it came from 2023. So, it's in a different presentation that I've done. Nick, do you have a question?
I do, and I don't mean to jump ahead if you were going to address this later, but it also came up at the conference yesterday. Is there a 10-month clock on the expenditure of these funds?
Yeah, so that is something we are going to talk about. Can I answer that when we get to that slide? Is that?
Of course.
Okay,
Thank
cool.
you.
Yes, and I will explain kind of what that looks like and what that means. So, Orion.
I just wanted to check. I like to see Springfield is there, and I know the municipal jails don't hold people very long, so I don't know if they would have a purpose. But there's also, I think, Reedsport and Florence.
Yeah, we
jails.
talked to both of them, and
Okay.
both of them indicated that they weren't going to be a part of this, and so they were not included.
Awesome.
This was the list that we came up with based on that information. So, okay, Stacy.
I'm sorry if I missed this, but is there a reason Norcor is listed? I mean, there's other jail providers too, so just curious why Norcor is on there specifically, and I can't find what the asterisk means.
Yeah, Norcor is in there just because it represents counties, like a number of counties, and so it's let's see, the Dalles, Wasco County. I'm gonna miss some counties in here. Okay, hold on. Gilliam, Hood River,
Gilliam,
Sherman, and
Hart.
Wasco.
So they would apply on their behalf.
Yes,
So,
and so
okay.
Norcor is considered a correctional facility of its own.
Okay,
That's why.
thank you.
Yep. Sorry, I have a lot of notes on this slide. It's kind of hard to go through. Any other questions on this? Okay. Stacy, you have your hand up. I just want to make sure that is not a second question. Okay, perfect.
Nope, I'm just
Okay. All right. Okay, so this is the application timeline. This is in the grant world, a very, very fast timeline. Okay. Part of this is because 4002 ended this spring. Usually when we launch a grant, we typically have about a year to do so, 18 months to a year, just because of all the steps that are involved. This one is a much shorter timeline. There's a lot of, we had to do rulemaking, we had to do all sorts of things with this. And so we've been working on it pretty much since May. And then are going to get money out November, beginning of December. So this is kind of the timeline. The grant solicitation has been released. Grant applications are due October 13th. There will be a staff analysis that is then presented to the grant advisory committee. That will then make funding recommendations to the commission. The November commission meeting has not yet been scheduled, and so I don't have a date for that. But they will be the ones that make those final award decisions. Obviously, with Thanksgiving, we're trying to kind of get it to where we can accommodate. It's sometimes hard to get it around the holidays, and so if it's not November, it will be early December. And so I will be sure to update you all. It'll be on our website. You'll get notification of it as soon as we do schedule that. So, but I didn't want to put a date down and then it'd be wrong. So, but that is the timeline for this application. Does anybody have any questions on this? It's pretty straightforward. Okay. Excuse me. Let me, before I go through here, I thought I had a slide on this to answer Nick's question, and I don't. So I'm actually going to go, before we get into this, I'll just go back to this slide. One of the things that has been asked is there is a piece in the solicitation that talks about project period. So the project period for this grant is September 30th to, or October 1st of 2024 to September 30th of 2025. And so what that means is and this is kind of how there's sometimes some confusion with money not getting out until December, right? We will get contracts out, money will get out. Sometimes contracts getting signed takes a little bit, right? Because everybody has their own internal process. Let's say a contract doesn't get signed and executed until January. That applicant can then go back and pay for things from October with grant funds, if that makes sense. And so even if there isn't money available or funds available, the project period or expenses can then go back to that October 1st date. I do know that sometimes there's questions about money being spent, maybe unspent or underspending as the grant period or project period comes to a close. As it stands right now, there is an expectation that that money be spent within that time frame. Okay, so any sort of extra money that's left over on the September 30th, 2025 date is something that, as it stands right now, will then be returned to CJC. So does that answer your question, Nick? I just want to make sure that's pretty clear.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Orion.
Sorry, I feel like I'm talking a lot, and I'm not particularly going to be applying. I've just talked to a lot of the jails about this. If there are jails that don't end up applying, and first of all, like, thank you to CJC. Like, I can't emphasize more what Rachel was saying about the timeline that they've been working on to get this funding out the door. If certain facilities decide not to apply, does that funding get wrapped back up with other facilities? Would be one question. Okay.
So
And
no, but go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
no. Jails get really scared when they hear the word grant, because usually they're dealing with like BJA and these other ones that have a lot of reporting requirements as well. And so there's just feedback that I've heard, like people are a little nervous when they hear about this as a grant, and this was legislative funding that really want to get out to them, and want to see more expansion of MOUD. And so if there's anything you can say about kind of the expectation of this and what it's going to mean kind of going forward, or maybe that's later in your talk.
Yeah, so I attached a grant agreement to the solicitation that actually goes through reporting expectations. There is quarterly reporting. There is a financial aspect to it because we need to know what money you're spending. And so every quarter there is an expectation that you do turn something into us. So every 3 months, excuse me, every 3 months. As of right now, I don't believe off the top of my head there's any expectations of data, just simply because this is a brand new grant. But there is an expectation that there is financial quarterly reporting so that we know how you're spending your money and that everything is an allowable expense and stuff like that. So that's kind of but there's a lot more detail in the grant agreement that was provided to you all. It's just a sample grant agreement, but it doesn't have anything specific in terms of where it's going or how much money and all of that. But those terms are in there for you all to review. So if you do have any questions, you can reach out to me. In terms of if facilities don't apply and there's leftover money, that will not be recalculated back into the formula, just because we do have to get funds out so quick. So if we had to do that, we would then have to ask you to do another budget projection sheet, and we don't have time for that. So that will then, any leftover money, there is a potential, and this is also written in the OARs for this particular grant, is that there will be potential for a supplemental round further on in this grant cycle. So, but no, it will not be recycled back into the formula. So.
Okay. And then just as far as, the high bar of obtaining like a competitive grant, if they go through the effort to apply for this and get an application together in effort to meet things that are listed as allowable expenses and expansions, that if you wanted to comment at all on that aspect.
Are you talking about, so this is not
how hard it is for them to actually get funded if they go through the work to get this?
So this is a formula grant. So this is quite simple. As long as they meet the eligibility requirements and they meet the application requirements, which are outlined, then if I go back to this table, this is as much as they can apply for, then that's the analysis, is if they're eligible and they meet the application requirements, the funding makes sense. This, in terms of their ask, this is how much they can ask for. That's what they get. So it is not competitive.
Right. They just get nervous when they hear the word grant. And so I think kind of just spelling that stuff out was really helpful.
Okay. Any other questions? And I apologize. I thought I had a slide on the grant project period. I've been putting together 2 presentations at the same time, and it's probably in my other one. So I am sorry. Okay. This is going to be a little technical, and I apologize. This is kind of going to be a little bit dry. I'm going to try to get through these as quickly as possible. This is the section where I think if you need this slide deck, this will be the most helpful. I don't know how many of you have actually been in SM Apply. It is sometimes a bit counterintuitive, and so I have a bunch of screenshots. They aren't from the JMOUD application. They're from another grant that is in existence and is moving and kind of going forward. And so I pulled some screenshots so that you could see what it looks like and kind of walk through this process of applying. I'll try to get through this. If you do have questions, please raise your hand, interrupt me. But this is what the application, when you get into SM Apply, it includes a cover sheet. We need all of the information on the cover sheet. There are narrative questions that you will see. You'll be able to fill them out and respond to them within SM Apply. I believe there are word limits on all of them. And those are laid out. You will be able to download a budget projection sheet and then upload it again. And we'll I provided an example in the solicitation that was sent out, so you all have an idea of what that looks like. And then also we just offer, this is not required, but if you do have an MOU, for any, an active program and an active MOU that is an optional upload, just so that we know that you have it. Again, if you don't, not a big deal. It is optional. So, and just a reminder that applications are due October 13th at 11:59. That is a Sunday. Excuse me. So if we gave you that weekend just in case there are any issues. In the past, we've had some problems with the Friday deadline, people getting stuff in, and so there are those 2 extra days. My recommendation is to not wait until the 13th to put things in to SM Apply, but you do have that option and that weekend. Okay, so when you go in, this is what it will look like. Again, like I said, this is a grant that we have currently going. When you go in, you will be able to click on the jail-based medication grant, and you'll get this. And so you can log in, or you can register. Okay. And you'll then hit apply, and you will be asked to put your name. So let me back up. You will be asked to name your application. Okay. Be as specific as possible so that we know what we are looking at. So for instance, we have a specialty court grant. Some of those treatment courts have their own names. We require the, Lane County Adult Drug Court is how we would prefer the name. And so we know what kind of treatment court it is. We know what county it's linked to. And so just keep that in mind, that you want to be very clear in terms of like, we get where we're looking at and what facility we're actually analyzing. So keep that in mind when you are naming it. If there is an issue and I'm not quite sure, I will reach out to you and ask you to kind of fix it. So you can't get it wrong. Just keep that in mind, that you will be asked to name it. You'll then hit apply, and then it will go through to this page. And when you go in, if you are the person who sets up, who registers, who logs in, you will be the owner, okay, of this application. You can add collaborators. So if you are working with other people who are working on this application with you, you can add a collaborator within your organization. If you are doing a joint application, you can also add them as a collaborator. You'll just click on that, and then you'll get they will get an invitation from you to then be a collaborator, so that they can go in and also work on the application. Okay, so whoever starts the application is the owner, and then they can then add collaborators if they are working with other people. Okay. Okay, so again, you will get this will be kind of the front page. If you look at your tasks, you'll see what you're supposed to do before you are going to submit the application. So it will clearly lay out the tasks that you're supposed to complete. Okay. And then you'll click on cover sheet. Okay. So if every task will open up a new page, and every required section, please complete it. Okay. And so the cover sheet is information that we have for disbursements that we use as kind of internally who owns this and where things are supposed to go. And so it's really important that this is filled out correctly. The primary contact information in particular, sometimes when we have a grant advisory committee or a commission meeting, they ask questions that we don't have the ability to answer. We will then reach out to this primary contact to get that answer. So be very deliberate in who that person is, as well as the fiscal contact information in terms of who's going to be submitting that fiscal information, those fiscal reports that we require. Okay, so you'll see this. You click on this, you can fill that out. And then you'll have 2 options. You have a save and continue editing, or a mark as complete. Okay. If you save and continue editing, if you look over here, whoops, sorry, click too soon. You'll see that there is a half circle, a half full circle. It means that the stage has been opened and has been started. this stage is considered unlocked and you can go back in and make changes and you can add to it. Okay, so if you have a half circle, it means that you've started it, but you didn't get to finish it for whatever reason. If you mark it as complete, okay, you'll get a full circle with a check mark. Okay, that means that this particular section is now locked. Okay. If you do need to go back in and add information, let's say your primary contact information, you decide that you want to change that, you can click on the 3 little buttons at the top right of the title right there. Okay. And it'll have a drop down where it'll say reset or edit. Okay. If you reset, you're going to lose everything. If you need to just start over, right? You want to start that section over. It will reset everything and you can go. So let's say you decide you don't like any of your narrative questions, you want to start over, you can go through and reset. If you hit edit, it will open up that stage again. And then you can allow, or it will allow you to make any sort of changes without losing any of the information. Okay, so those are kind of your 2 options. If you do complete a task, you want to go back and make changes, you can either reset or you can edit. Okay, you'll then hit back to the application to go back to the main page, so that you do know, again, you've completed this task, you have this many more to go, and you can go through kind of task by task in completing it. Okay. I feel like I'm going kind of fast, so if there are any questions or if this is way too confusing, please interrupt me. And again, I cannot stress enough, these slides will be provided. Okay, so you will kind of have a walkthrough and a guide. So I will send this out to everybody. So the application, there will be directions for application questions. Please read through those before you start answering the questions. We do kind of try to give some guidance. And then the questions themselves are designed, tried with this grant to not have too big of a lift. And so there's not a lot of questions, but we tried to address some of the application requirements that will be analyzed. And so be as thorough as possible. This is what they look like. So you will be able to type in, it will give you a word limit. Be as thorough as possible within that word limit, be direct, provide clarity. Probably the best advice I give people when doing application questions is that you don't want staff or the grant advisory committee to have to infer about anything that you're saying. You don't want us to have to make assumptions, and you don't want to have that we have to infer that this is what we think you meant. Mostly because we're probably going to get it wrong, right? And we are not you all. We don't know what you need. We don't know what your programs look like. We don't know any of that. And so we are tasked with analyzing the information that we receive. And if it's not clear, or if it's not a complete answer, that is what we have to go with. Okay. So just be as clear as possible, provide as much detail as possible. Don't forget that when you do get to the budget projection sheet, which is the next slide, you will have room there to also explain, but make sure you spend time with these narrative questions, just being succinct, direct, and clear, and try to avoid putting staff and the grant advisory committee in a position where we have to infer or make assumptions. Okay. Also, just to clarify, with all of this, the budget projection sheet, with anything in SM Apply that we get with narrative questions, if there's something that doesn't make sense, we'll reach out to you. Okay, so if there's something that's missing, or if there's something that didn't quite get through, sometimes we've had people upload the wrong document, or we've had grantees. I know one time they had a grantee in a different grant. Basically, the way it was saved was like half the answer got saved. And so we will reach out to you if there is something that just doesn't look right, or if there's, something missing or something like that. We will do that before the grant advisory committee meets. And so that will be part of our analysis. So this isn't, I don't want you all to think like, if you mess up once, you're done. I think with this one, just be deliberate and be clear in what you're trying to answer. But if there's a mistake or just something that's very much out there, we will definitely reach out, just because we want to be able to present accurate information as well, right? Okay, so this is the budget projection sheet. It does include, I'm sorry, you all need to include itemized request listed by category. So there are different categories that you can go through. Be as specific as possible. We do provide 10 lines for each category. And so if you do need more than that for something, for some reason in a category, just let us know and we can potentially adjust that for you. So be as specific as possible, be as clear as possible. Sometimes, you know, we'll get something, trying to think of an example. So in our specialty court grant, we have something called participant supports. And essentially it's, you know, bus passes, you know, gift cards, those kinds of things potentially to help support participants in the treatment court. If we get something that says participant supports, we don't actually know what that is. Okay. So be very specific in terms of what you are requesting. And then again, kind of back to Orion's question in the very beginning, with those funding requirements, please be very specific with the narrative. Okay. Make sure that you can link it back to those priorities and those areas and categories where funding must go. We did not put word limits on the narrative, and so you can be as verbose as you need to be to make that link. Okay. And again, this is especially true here where you don't want to put staff or a grant advisory committee in a position that we have to infer. Okay, so be clear. If you all have questions about the thoroughness or the clarity of your responses, please feel free to reach out and get feedback from me. Okay, I can't tell you what to write, and I can't tell you that if you put this down, this will be approved, but I can give feedback in terms of wording, or this isn't very clear, be more specific here. So I am more than happy to review application for completeness, and I'm more than happy to review a budget projection sheet for completeness or for clarity, or if it makes sense or doesn't make sense. Also, if there is confusion about what category something should go into, please reach out and I can help you. Okay. And then we also have a grant administration guide that has allowable and unallowable expenses. So please refer to that. That is also something that staff checks when we do our analysis. And so we will be looking at that as well. But if a request is unallowable and it is part of your budget, that is something that we will cut out. And so just keep that in mind. Any questions on this? Kind of a lot. Okay. Okay, so then you'll get all of your check marks. You have an optional MOU to upload. And then you'll kind of, when you get here, it says 4 or 4 tasks completed, everything is good. You have a big green button that says submit. Okay, you have to hit that green button. Okay, we've had people in the past with grant applications go through, complete all their tasks and leave it at that. We will not get it unless you hit submit. Okay, I know that sounds kind of like something that everybody should do, but it just please hit the button, especially by the deadline, so that we don't have to go back and say, where's your application? Okay, you will receive an email that will confirm that your application has been submitted. Okay, so if the 13th passes and you haven't received that email, more than likely it's because you didn't hit submit, but please reach out to me and we can figure out what happened. Okay, but please hit that button. Okay, that is all I have. I know that was very fast. Any questions on the grant itself, on the process, on expectations, on any sort of analysis, anything like that that you all may have? Okay. Oh, Nick.
So I have a question you probably can't answer, but it's going to be my county administrator's first question to me.
Mhm.
What's your feel on this? You said this is pilot program. What's your feel on this continuing into future fiscal? She's going to be really apprehensive to add personnel. She may be even pretty apprehensive to add contract personnel on such a short-term deal.
Yeah, that's a great
Where you-
question.
Where are you at on that? I know you don't
Yeah,
have
so CJC has put in part of our budget that we have to submit for the new biennium. We have put in a request to renew this grant. And so we have every intention of asking the governor's office and the legislature to continue to support this grant. We just don't know, right? This is kind of the nature of how grants function. We call it a pilot program simply because that's essentially what it is as it stands. But we do have every intention of continuing or asking to continue the funding beyond, next September and into the new biennium. So that is in the works. There are people that were involved in the original grant program and writing the bill that are also supportive of that as well. And so, there are people that are aware that we want to continue this grant. Is that helpful?
Yes, that's
Okay.
helpful. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Orion?
Thank you so much for doing this for everyone. Just want to point out too, like there will be the Medicaid 115 reentry waiver. I know that's still a stopgap between when this funding period is there, but appreciate that CJC is on top of that and thinking about this for, just the work that's there. And then I see that Raina from Mal here put a question in the chat.
Oh, thank you for pointing that out. So let's see, I may have missed the information at the beginning. Who should fill out the grant and will the grant information be sent out and to who? If Raina, is that I want to make sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. If you want to drop your information into the chat, I can make sure that you get the solicitation that was sent out. We have an interested parties list and I sent it out to a list of all the jail commanders that was provided to me. If you didn't get it, then I can send it out. And who should fill out the grant is up to you all in terms of who should fill it out. There is an eligibility issue there, right? So it has to be somebody that is connected to a correctional facility. That is who where the money is going to go. But that's kind of up to you in terms of who should be the owner of the application. Orion, sorry, Nick, your hand's
No.
up still. Did you have another question?
No,
Nope.
I forgot to look. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, you're fine.
And I feel like I've talked a lot, but I did have one other, just because there might be confusion. We just sent out the readiness assessment for the 115 waiver, and we were kind of prescriptive that it went to commanders, but having them work with health services to complete it together jointly. And so that's why it's just helpful to be clear for them, since I think it was just sent to commanders.
Yeah, it does. That is who the applicant has to be. It can't be a treatment provider that you're working with. It can't be it has to be that correctional facility has to be the applicant. And so that's where we're talking about eligible applicants. That is pretty clear. It doesn't mean that you can't work with other people. It doesn't mean they can't be part of your team. This is why we have an optional upload of an MOU if you're working with, treatment providers or any of that, but the applicant has to be a correctional facility.
But I think to Raina's question, because a lot of times the providers in a facility are going to be more knowledgeable about the MOUD program than the jail commander, needs to be down in the weeds. And just there's no preference or no requirement that that's who fills it out, but that the actual applicant of the grant or helps them complete it.
The person who hits submit should be connected to a correctional facility. That's why we went over kind of the collaborator. That is very common. So again, I know I've used specialty court as an example, but it's kind of pretty similar. Specialty court, we have treatment courts. The applicant for specialty court is the county. And so they are the applicant, and then the money supports those treatment courts within that county. And so it's kind of the same thing. Obviously, the treatment court does a lot with the application process and reporting and things like that. So we're very involved with them, but they are not the applicant. And that is just simply because that is how the bill is written. Okay. So same thing here. It's why we make sure that there is that instruction on the collaborator. So. Okay. Any other questions? Issues? Okay. Feel free to reach out to me if something does come up as you're completing these. Like I said, this recording will be made available. Probably not today. More than likely, I think it does take a bit of time for us to be able to get it off of Teams and then upload it onto YouTube, I think is where we keep them. So I will send out a link to you all who attended and then make sure everybody else gets it, as well as the slide deck, so that you do have that as a little bit of guidance as you go through SM Apply. Like I said, it's not the most intuitive program, so if you do have issues, please reach out. Okay. Thank you so much for taking part of your Friday. I hope you all have a good weekend and enjoy the beautiful weather. We'll see y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Yep.